Good evening and welcome. I call to order the Lake Havasu City Council regular meeting on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. We'll now have an invocation from Pastor Dale Ray with Lakeview Community Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Randy Nelson with the Stonebridge Veterans.
Happy New Year.
Could you turn?
New Year.
Pastor, could you just hit the button? Thank you.
It's a new year and it's a new day. One of the great things about the new year is we reflect over where we've been and where we're going. The scriptures remind us in Psalm 118, this is the day the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. Also, we're reminded, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever. Tonight as we pray, Lord, I ask your mercies be refreshed upon our mayor and upon our council members. Lord, that as we remember you, we thank you, Lord, for all that you have accomplished in our lives through the past year and back beyond that. But we also look expectantly for the victories and the successes, for the things that you have in store for these precious folks as they govern our city, Lake Havasu. Lord, we pray your hedge of protection about the city and all that inhabit this place. And we certainly remember those in California. We ask, Lord, that you would bring relief. Lord, I ask in particular that you would protect them from fresh firestorms, and that you would bring peace and healing to the people who have suffered such great loss, and bring those who have the responsibility to govern and bring out of the ashes of destruction. I ask a miraculous restoration. So we give you thanks. We give you praise. Bless our mayor. Bless our council. Bless Lake Havasu City for the year that is to come, 2025, to your glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Please stand, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Randy Nelson. I'm the president and founder of Stonebridge Veterans here in Lake Havasu. How we started that, I was a co-host of Veterans Coffee Time in the little city of Payson, Arizona, about 170 miles east of here. We had about 150 members, veterans that belong. I moved to Lake Havasu City to get a little closer to my family. And one night I was talking to a couple of veterans and I said, hey, you know, when I was in Payson, we had this little Veterans Coffee Time. One of the guys was a Navy fellow and one was a Marine. And they said, well, we can do that here. So we started with 3 members. We now have 194 veterans. We get about 40 to 50 at each meeting. And what we do is provide speakers that can come in and talk to veterans about things that are important to them, things that are important to the veteran community. We have people that come in and talk, Mr. Mayor, as you know, talk about things that are happening in the city. We have the police chief, the sheriff of Mojave County, and they talk about things within the community that are important to veterans. And then we have people that come in and talk to things that are important directly to the veterans. One thing that we try to do is to make it an opportunity for veterans to make a difference in their lives through camaraderie and meetings and having people come in and talk to them. The biggest thing that I think that I get out of it is the camaraderie that they enjoy, because these veterans have not known each other forever. And when they meet each other, all of a sudden they're friends, they're buddies, because they do have a common thing in common. Thank you.
So when do you meet?
Pardon?
When do you meet?
Oh, we meet every Wednesday morning at the VFW at 9 o'clock. Now, a lot of guys get there at 8 and they start chit-chatting.
They have breakfast.
And they have breakfast, sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for presenting this evening, and thank you for what your group does in Lake Havasu City.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, take care. Item 4 on the agenda is roll call. Ms. Williams, if you please call the roll.
Council members Nancy Campbell.
Here.
Jenny Koch.
Here.
Jim Dolan.
Here.
David Diaz.
Here.
Cameron Moses. Vice Mayor Michelle Lynn.
Here.
Mayor Cal Sheehy.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Would any of the council members like to remove any of the items for separate discussion?
Mayor,
Councilmember Koch,
motion.
please.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Koch and a second from Councilmember Diaz. We are ready to vote. Could you hit your screen?
Councilmember Dolan, your vote.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 6 is our correspondence, communications, petitions, announcements, and the city manager report. Item 6.1 is announce vacancies on Lake Havasu City boards, committees, and commissions. Ms. Williams?
Mayor and City Council, this item is to announce vacancies on Lake Havasu City boards, committees, and commissions. Currently, the city has 2 vacancies on the Board of Adjustment with 1 regular member and 1 alternate member. Anyone interested can pick up a packet at City Hall, and they are also available on the city's website at www.lhcaz.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.2 is our city manager's report. Good evening, Mr. Knutson.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council, and Happy New Year. Some bittersweet news with several employees, a few employees that are retiring after many, many years of service. First off, congratulations to Lake Havasu City employee Sherry Kowalski. 34 years of dedicated service with Lake Havasu City Parks and Recreation. Sherry Kowalski retires as an administrative supervisor. Since 1990, her hard work and commitment have enriched countless lives, supported exceptional programs, and ensured the city parks thrive for our kids and adults throughout the community. Best wishes to you, Sherry. You will be missed, and happy retirement. And also join me in congratulating Officer Cindy Slack for 27 years of service to Lake Havasu PD and the community. She's retiring. She had retired on January 3rd, just a couple days ago. Cindy has served in various roles, including SWAT, criminal investigations, and many more duties. Her dedication to the community has been invaluable, and so please join me in thanking her for her service. Congratulations to you, Cindy. And congratulations to Captain Nick Jones. Captain Jones joined the fire department, or please join the fire department at 0700 hours, 7 a.m. on Wednesday, January 15th at Station 5 as we honor Captain Jones and his 26 and a half years of service to the Lake Havasu City Fire Department. This will be his final walkout at Station 5. It's obviously very bittersweet to see some longtime employees retire. I thank them for their dedication and what they've done to make Lake Havasu City a success. And while we're going to miss them, we are very grateful for their lasting impact on our community and within the organization and the respective departments. Lake Havasu City, we hosted the Leadership Lake Havasu program for their Government Impact City and County Government Day. Assistant City Manager Anthony Kozlowski kicked off the day with a presentation on City Government 101. Mayor, you spoke on how to change ordinances and laws, as well as Robert's Rules of Order. Council members were present to answer panel questions, and the class toured the Mulberry Treatment Plant, the Police Department, and Fire Station 1. And then the day concluded with a mock City Council meeting, providing the participants of the leadership program with a hands-on opportunity to engage in the decision-making process and gain insight into the local government process. The Veterans Treatment Court graduation of 2025, the very first one, took place just last week on Friday, January 10th, and took place in this room in the council chambers here at the courthouse. We were grateful for Penny Pugh from Congressman Gosar's office to join us. And we had council members Cameron Moses, Nancy Campbell, and David Diaz, as well as new board supervisor Sonny Borelli joined us as well too, along with city staff. We're all in attendance. It was a day of celebration and support as we honored the veterans who successfully graduated from the program. And a reminder or some news for some that we're going to have a household hazardous waste event day coming up. And this is a free event for all of our residents. You must be a Lake Havasu City resident to participate. And this will take place on Saturday, February 1st, in a couple of weeks. It'll be from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and it'll take place at Fire Station 2, which of course is located at 2065 North Kiowa Boulevard. So we encourage all of the residents to take advantage of this opportunity to dispose of all your household hazardous items from your home, including your batteries, your tires, paints, fluorescent bulbs, all those things that don't belong in the landfill. We've asked Republic Services to step up and make sure that everybody that's at that event in line will be able to dispose of their items. So please join us on February 1st. Let's keep all these things out of the landfill and of course out of the desert. So with that, Mayor and Council, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Knudsen. All right, we'll move on to item 7, which are public hearings. During each of the public hearings, we'll have an opportunity for citizens to engage on that conversation. We'll have discussion, open up the public hearing, and invite any citizens that want to address the City Council on that item to speak. There will be a light indicator box on the screens during that time. We ask that when you're engaging with the council, you direct your comments directly to the City Council from the podium in front of me. We also encourage you to talk at the item so we can have a two-way conversation. At the end of the meeting, we'll have a call to the public where we will listen to any questions, comments, or concerns that council members have that is not on the agenda, but we won't be able to have a two-way conversation at that time. And I'll go over the guidelines of that when we get there. But we'll start with item 7.1, which is discussion and action for an ordinance number 25-1352, approving the rezone of tract 2302, block 1, parcels A and C at 360 Cypress Drive and 340 Mulberry Avenue and 1873 Walnut Drive. It's approximately 21.4 acres from single family residential R1 to public lands and facilities district P1. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and present public. The subject property is a 21-acre parcel owned by the city and used for wastewater treatment purposes, among other city uses. The property is bounded by Cypress Drive, Oak Drive, Mulberry Avenue, Walnut Drive, and Spruce Drive. The subject property is currently zoned single-family residential district, R1, and is surrounded by residential uses. Lake Havasu City is considered a full-service city and provides a wide range of services, including police, fire, sewer, and water, parks, and much more. All these services require public buildings and lands upon which these facilities can be placed and expanded as needed to continue serving what is a growing community. The Mulberry Wastewater Treatment Plant is one of these facilities, and the need for a new water quality laboratory on this property has been recognized and budgeted by the City Council. A zoning map amendment rezone of the property from single-family residential R1 district to public lands and facilities P1 district is necessary to help facilitate the needs of the city. This change will allow for the construction of a new water quality laboratory adjacent to the Mulberry Wastewater Treatment Plant and allow for future expansion as needs arise. Although not a part of the rezone request, the site plan and building facade information are provided to give an overall view of the main purpose behind the rezone at this time. The site plan shows the new building on the north end of the proposed rezone area and will permit the testing lab to move out of the main Mulberry treatment facility building that's located to the south of this in dire need of upgrading and into this new structure. The site will include a parking lot and site landscaping. The structure will meet all building and development standards. And the specific focus on the site plan is at the corner of Cypress and Oak at the northeast corner of the property that was shown earlier on this slide. So it's generally right here. The building facade, this slide shows the building facade as it would appear looking from the west, southwest towards the new building. The building will incorporate a variety of elevation changes, materials, and colors to add interest to the project. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this application at its December 18th, 2024 meeting, and no person spoke at the hearing. Mr. Mayor, the city is the applicant on this, so I'll try to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Are there any questions from members of the council for Mr. Gilbert? All right, this item was heard before our Planning and Zoning Commission and was recommended for approval this evening of 7-0. That was held on December 18th, 2024. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the City Council on this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council for discussion or possible motion.
Mayor,
Councilmember Koch?
I'd like to make a motion. I also like to make a comment. It's really exciting to see this item finally on the agenda. We've been in dire needs of an upgrade of that lab for many years now, and so it's exciting to see that on there. So with that, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I move to adopt ordinance number 25-1352, approving the rezone of tract 2302, block 1, parcels A and C, 360 Cypress Drive, 340 Mulberry Avenue, and 1873 Walnut Drive from single-family residential district to public lands and facilities district.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Koch and we have a second from Vice Mayor Lynn. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Councilmember Dolan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 7.2 is a master services and purchasing agreement with Axon Enterprises, Inc. for the cooperative purchase of Draft 1 AI artificial intelligence assisted report writing software. Chief Sterling?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. How are you all doing tonight? Good. Tonight I'm before you, ask your approval for a 30-month master services and purchasing agreement with Axon Enterprises for the purchase of what's called Draft 1 AI-assisted report writing software. So it's a mouthful. This is using a Sourcewell contract because the purchase is going to be over $50,000. To give everybody a little bit of a background, so since about 2012, we went full deployment on body cameras. All of our officers wear body-worn cameras. That contract is with Axon Enterprises, formerly known as Taser International. And what happens when our officers record an incident on their body cameras, that digital evidence gets uploaded into a platform called evidence.com, and that's where all the evidence is managed. So I'm giving this background as we lead into how this whole process works. Since one of my goals has always been to try to streamline as many processes as I can. And so technology is a key piece of how we do that. And one of the things to essentially save a lot of time that's currently utilized by our officers in writing reports, the admin and the not so fun side of law enforcement, Axon Enterprise actually came up with a software called Draft 1 that generates AI report from our audio captured on our body-worn cameras. And so what happens is essentially when the officer obtains their digital evidence, the evidence is uploaded into evidence.com. If we go ahead with this purchase, what happens is there's a button for them to push, please draft a report based on that. The AI will actually generate a report on the audio portion of that, and it will provide essentially that quick a report of what occurred. And so there are safeguards involved in this, and that's always a concern. The safeguards are essentially that there are key elements when that report is drafted where the officer has to go in and add information such as their own observations, anything from the senses, the smells, taste, all of those things that correlate into what AI can't pick up. And so those safeguards, the officer has to go into those sections and physically do something with it, right? Once they get through all those safeguards, then they're able to copy and paste that, and they attest to the fact that they've read the report and it is a depiction of what occurred. And so once they do that, then they copy that and put it into our current report manager system, and that report gets sent to the supervisor for a second review process. And so that's in a nutshell the process. Obviously, implementing this type of software it will reduce the amount of officers' time that can be better utilized for serving our community in other ways. And we have Our current contract with Axon is a 5-year contract. We are currently right in the middle, 2.5-year mark. And so as opposed to renegotiate the entire contract, we're asking to move forward with a 30-month contract to align with our current contract with them. And so for the first portion, would be in the amount of $20,793.18, which is currently available in our police department's 24-25 operating budget. That will get us from February until the end of June of this year. And then appropriations will be requested in the remaining budget cycles for the total amount of $259,914.73. So that's a brief overview of that. Tonight I'm asking for your approval for that, but I'm sure there may be questions, and I'm here to answer those for you.
Thank you, Chief Sterling. So I talked about this with you earlier, Chief, but in talking with some of the officers that piloted the program, what they've been able to find is that they've increased their capacity and their efficiency, where they're able to actually do, as you indicated, more police work,
Yes.
so more traffic stops, more reports, more things, and to their surprise, that the accuracy was strong. You've also had some conversation, obviously, with the prosecutor's office to ensure that the case can be adjudicated in a proper way. So this is one way of technology coming in to help augment our staffing resources. And certainly it'd be more attractive to me if I was a law enforcement type person to have this to help me write the report than spend hours either handwriting or typing something. So
no, those are all great points, sir. I appreciate you bringing those up. And yes, I will tell you that, we did a pilot program, of course, to test this out. And, there are some officers are reluctant to change and do things differently, but the majority of the test group that participated in it was very pleased with the product, how simple it was. There's really very minimal training time that goes into this. So we can essentially hit the ground running with the push of a button. And that's what's so unique about this. It varies on the officer's skill level on how they write reports. So, how much time is saved will be dependent, and depending on the amount of involvement in that specific report. So there's so many variables, but just in our test group, we were able on average save about 15 minutes per report that was drafted. So, ultimately, if you add up those numbers, it's significant when we take over 7,000 police reports a year. So, so we're excited about that.
fantastic. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember Campbell.
Question. What is I had somebody talk to me just the other day about, number one, they were requesting some documentation. And do you charge for a report?
There is charges for it, yes.
Okay. And approximately how long does it take for them to get the report back right now? Like if they came and did a report request?
And I'll caveat my first answer to you. Depends. Victims are given reports for free. That's part of legislation.
Okay.
But other reports based on other requests, it varies on how involved that report is. Records does a very good job of being able to, if there's simple requests that come in, they're able to really get that product out in a relatively, timely manner. Ones that are well involved and there's a lot of documents, it may take more time because there is that redaction process that goes into that.
And I'm only asking you these questions because I think that this is going to better, to me, it made me want to vote for this even more when this person told me they had requested a video and they said that it could take upwards of a year to get that. Is that logical? I mean, am I getting proper information? That's why I'm going straight to you.
I will say two different animals here.
Okay.
So the video, what's kind of unique about this is once this drafts a report, that draft, the AI draft is no longer there. Okay. So the report is what exists. And so that's one side of it. The other side is the video, the digital evidence piece that still exists as well. Right. And so on the digital side of it, when videos are requested, there's a redaction process to that. Redaction tools have come a long ways over the years. So that process is streamlined, but depending on how many requests there are, you gotta consider that a video redaction is almost a minute by minute redaction process. So you can see the time involved when you have, let's say, multiple officers on a scene plus dash cam from the cars. So it depends on the request, right? And so I haven't heard that. Our records unit keeps a running log of our request. The requests continue to increase every year, which we expected. And the time involved in that has gotten better. The process has gotten better, but it still takes some time. A year seems, that doesn't sound right at all. But if there's a specific case, I could definitely find that appropriate
That was
answer.
the question I had to you. Would this AI technology be able to, because I can go on and say Google Photos, find all the pictures of my son Kyle, and boom, I get a bunch of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just wondering if this was going to be able to help you at this, but it doesn't seem, maybe not now, but maybe later.
There is another software that we're looking at, researching, that may help with that process. This won't do that though.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councilmember Diaz.
Chief, thank you for bringing this to us. We talked about it too, you and I separately, but you're also going to save man hours from having to write the reports. That's
People hours.
Yes. People hours. And that's going to actually save money also. And there's warranties on this equipment with the provider.
It's part of our services contract with them. So as far as a warranty, ultimately there's, I guess for argument's sake, we could end the contract based on the legal side of things, based on the contract written.
All right. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the city council on this item? Yeah, please just make your way to the podium. State your name for the record.
My name's Emiliano Torres. I am a resident. If I'm understanding the software correctly, it takes audio and converts it to text. And after it does that conversion, the officer can make a correction. Is it suggesting wording? Because then I want the officer's words, not AI's suggested text. I'm a little concerned about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Chief.
No, that's a good question. Ultimately, it's not changing the text. There's different areas that are required for the officer to input data based on their own observations. The text itself won't be changed. And there's, they have the ultimate review. They can review their body camera footage to even go back and ensure that if that's not the way they recalled it, we have those processes in place now. That's what the officers do before they write their reports, just to make sure we are providing an accurate depiction of what actually occurred. So there are those things, and that's what I wanted to stress is there are these safeguards in place. The officer can't push a button and say, draft this report, and then just copy that over into a police report. There's additional safeguards, like I said, that have to be followed, and certain things have to be attended to before it can be moving on to the next piece of that, if that makes sense, I guess. Probably be easier to show you.
Mayor?
Chief, yes.
Chief, if part of that, the conversation too is the narrative, the verbiage that's created as part of the police report is based on the audio of the officer talking through the call. So it's not like their AI is taking the video and creating some type of description of the event.
Correct.
It's the audio from the officer that is creating the text.
Exactly. Yes. And the video aspect that's what eliminates the biases, the physical, the AI can't detect that because it's not analyzing the video. It's only analyzing the audio portion.
Yeah, you may see or watch a YouTube video, and on that YouTube video, you hear them talking and the way that they put the captioning below, you're like, that's not what that works. They're trying to grab the or the. And so it's very similar to that of what this AI technology will do for it. Amazingly, this technology is becoming so popular that we'll see in our doctor's offices cameras similar to the cameras around this room that are doing the documentation too for medical offices. And as Councilmember Koch said, we already have that. So, and it takes the actual audio that is being spoken in that room and doing that type of stuff. So, are there any other citizens that would like to address the council on this item? Yeah, please just make way to the podium. State your name for the record.
Kelly Lutz. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. You said there could be multiple cameras in an instant. Would that AI program go to all the different cameras and be applied? And so if there's 4 cameras, are there 4 different reports, or is there one arresting officer or one officer that writes the report for the whole incident and he reviews all 4 cameras that would have the AI applied to it? So that was just a question.
Sure. Yeah, great questions. Yeah, Chief.
Another great question. So each individual officer, there is always an initial officer, the responsible one for that call. Other officers write what's called a supplemental report. So that supplemental report would be added to the initial report, if that makes sense. So there could be original report, and then 4 other officers may write a supplement to that. And so there could potentially be, yes, 4 different officers and 4 AI drafted reports attached to that, if that makes sense. So that's a good question, Kelly.
Would anyone else like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council for discussion or possible motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Yeah, Councilmember Diaz.
There's no more discussion. I make a motion that we move to approve the master services and purchasing agreement with Axon Enterprises, Inc. for Draft 1 AI assistance report writing software for $259,914.73, and authorize the city manager to execute all agreement documentation on behalf of the city.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Diaz, and we have a second from Councilmember Campbell. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Councilmember Dolan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Councilmember Campbell? Thank you. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next item is item 7.3, purchase order change order approving additional work for the rehabilitation of high service pump number 12 by Lane Christensen Company. Mr. Kellett.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss our water treatment plant. I have a slide just to give you some semblance of what we're talking about. This here in the slide is high service pump 12 in its deconstructed phase. So to give you the sense of what we were doing, in September, we contracted with Lane to take apart the pump, see how it was working, and see any repairs that needed to be done. The original work was to replace the bowls and both take the pump out, bring it to their facility, and do further inspections. Upon those further inspections, additional work was found that is causing it to go over the $50,000 threshold, and thus we're here with council approval to complete the work. The work that needs to be done is seen in the photo on your left, but you can't see it because it's the pipe and column shaft that is sitting underneath that metal plate where the pump used to be. So those are found to be in need of repair, and the time to do it is when you already have it taken apart. So we're here to seek approval to continue this work and finish what we need for this particular high service pump. To give you a sense of what this does, this is a 3,000 gallon per minute pump. It serves our water distribution system and supplies over half of our system. So whether it's the north or the south part, we have 6 high service pumps, 6 go to the north, 6 go to the south, and this is one of those 6. And with that, I can take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kellett. Are there questions from members of the council for Mr. Kellett? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the city council on this item? Go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Is there any additional comments, questions, or possible motion?
Mayor?
Yeah, Councilmember Koch,
Make a motion.
please.
Sorry, my page went off here. I move to approve the purchase order change for additional work for the repair of high service pump number 12 at the city's water treatment plant with Lane Christensen Company for a total amount of $54,324.15.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Koch and a second from Councilmember Campbell. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Councilmember Dolan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is item 7.4, construction contract for the fiscal year 2024-25 crack seal and mastic program to Holbrook Asphalt. Mr. Young?
Good evening, Council and Mayor, or Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. It is time to start our street maintenance program again. This year we will be beginning with crack fill. We're looking to put down about 150 lane miles of crack fill, and we put a bid out for a contractor to come in and buy this, lay down the supplies that we bought last month. And Holbrook came in at $562,860, and the next bidder beyond that was over $300,000 plus. So we've worked with them over the last 8 years, I believe, and they've always done a good job for us. And I'd like to ask your permission to award the construction contract for FY 24-25 crack seal and mastic program to Holbrook Asphalt. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Are there questions from members of the council for Mr. Young?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Lynn.
I'm just curious on the traffic control. Why there's such a big, what does that even consist of? Because one bid is $160 all the way up to $800. Like, what is that cost? What does that include?
That's a moving program, so that they're constantly moving their traffic control alongside their machines and setting up signs at each end of the work area. That's basically the end of it. I don't have a reason why some contractors charge a lot more than others.
Okay, thank you.
And on our city website, on the agenda, there is the bid tabulation sheet, and you can see the different bids from the different contractors, is what Vice Mayor Lynn is referring to, if you're following along at home. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to address the city council on this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council for discussion or possible motion.
I'll make a motion.
Councilmember Diaz.
A motion to move forward with the award the construction contract for full year 2024-25 crack seal and mastic program with Holbrook Asphalt in the amount of $562,860.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Diaz and a second from Vice Mayor Lynn. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Councilmember Dolan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And our final public hearing of the evening is discussion and possible direction regarding council requests. Councilmember Diaz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm gonna first. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm gonna first read what our current the way our current ordinance reads, and I'll read the old one and what I'd like to revert it back to. So the current one is any member of the council may request that an item be researched further or placed on an item on a future agenda for consideration, discussion, or legal action by number one, making a motion and receiving a second from two other council members, which means a second and a third, and no vote is then necessary during the future discussion items portion of the city council meeting. Or we could go to Mr. Mayor and speak with him, and he can get it on the agenda after we discuss it. So it's not and or, it's or. You could do either way. And I did it the first way, and we got a second from Councilmember Campbell and a third from Councilmember Lynn. That was changed to read that way on March 14th of 2023. Prior to that, it read, and this was adopted on January 25th of 2022, any member of the council may request that an item be researched further or placed on an item on a future agenda for consideration, discussion, or legal action by making a motion and receiving a second. No vote necessary during the future discussion items portion of the city council. So we don't, and I had conversations with Mr. Mayor about this, and I appreciate your input. We don't totally use Robert's Rules of Order, but we we really do follow it pretty concisely in a lot of different ways that we do things. Now, if we were going to follow Robert's Rules of Order completely, we would say, I make a motion, someone makes a second, then we have to vote on it and get a third and a fourth and then have it that way. But we don't do it that way. We've never done it that way. I was able to go to the Arizona League of Cities, newly elected official orientation in Phoenix a couple of months ago. And we have 91 cities and towns in the state of Arizona. And I'm not going to say I talked to all 91 of them, but I talked to a lot of representatives that were there, city managers, city clerks, council members that had been council members many times before, and also one I'll mention in a second. And I can only find one city that was there that does what we do, and they actually do it in writing. A council member has to put it in writing through the mayor's office and the city manager. And then a second council member has to put it in writing. And then the third council member has to put it in writing. So I approached the ex-city attorney for that city, and that's the city of Gilbert. And she told me that they are trying to probably change that because it's anonymous and the citizens are frustrated about it. So I talked to our local cities here in this area, and none of them do this a third requirement. It's just the first and the second. Okay. So I have faith in every single one of my fellow council members that if they want to bring up something, I might totally disagree with it, but I'm going to give them a second because they've done their due diligence. They had a constituent probably talk to them and say, this is an issue. And then they did their research. And I really don't think they're going to do something willy-nilly and put it on the agenda. And let's have the discussion out in front of the people. Let's have the people give input. And then after all that discussion takes place, after public comment and city council is talking about it, then we decide if it's something that we do or we don't, or it might not even be part of our purview. And that comes up during the research part of it. But to have a system right now that can seem to block people from putting things on the agenda, even if just the way it's worded, is not right in my estimation. Now, luckily, and I'm going to be very honest, I'm very disappointed that Mr. Moses is not here tonight. And no slam on Mr. Moses, but we had 7 people running for city council this last election. The 3 people that won all said during the election process while we were campaigning that we were for going back to the first and the second. 2 of the incumbents, one of them sitting to my right, was a no vote last time. So she voted not to have a third requirement, and Mr. Moses voted not to have a third requirement. So I'm hoping when we discuss this, we can do the right thing and not shut people out that want to have their voices heard. And with that, Mr. Mayor, we could open it up for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Diaz. So I'm just going to back up and give a little bit of background on generally staff would give some sort of report, but as Councilmember Diaz had indicated, he had request at a future agenda item on an agenda to have this item heard. And so when he did that, he got a second and a third. We went to work and got it on the agenda. That's why we're here today. And so generally when that occurs, we have the council member asks it. It takes one cycle because the deadline for the agenda, very roughly speaking, the deadline for our agenda is today. So today is the deadline for our meeting on the 28th of January. So it takes us about a month to get this item on the agenda. Councilmember Diaz asked for this on December 14th. This is a month since that meeting has occurred, and we are now here having that discussion. I'm sorry? December 26th. We didn't have a meeting on December 26th. November 26th is when I asked. Oh, on your first meeting, correct. Okay, perfect. November 26th is when he asked it, and we had just one meeting in December 14th. So so we went through that cycle. When that occurs, we have the council member then give the presentation, which is what Councilmember Diaz just did. We find if there's consensus among the members of council. If that is the case, we then would bring the item to a future council meeting with an introduction. Anything we do from a policy perspective has an introduction to the ordinance. And then we have a subsequent meeting for a final adoption. So in this case, if you work through and do the future agenda item portion of the meeting, it's going to take basically three cycles of meetings. You have this discussion we're having today. You would then, if there's consensus of the council to bring something forward, you would have an introduction with a public hearing, and then we would have final adoption with a public hearing. If you worked through my office, which is another opportunity that you have, we generally have an understanding of what it is that the council member is looking for. So we have some sort of a semblance that we can put forward. So generally that will come to us in a meeting in the form of an introduction of some sort of code change or ordinance that is going to occur for the council to consider, basically cutting one meeting off of that process, because we were able to work together and figure out kind of what that is. Going through this method, we don't know until we have this meeting. So that's what we're here to do. So we'll have the discussion about how we get things on the agenda and where we stand. So while I have the floor, I'll just kind of give my general overview of where I think this is at. This is really not an issue. So this has never been an issue. I happen to be the one in charge of the agenda, along with my colleagues, and there's never been one thing denied. I have not denied one thing that a council member has asked me for, with the exception of one item that a council member asked me about building heights. And I didn't believe that the citizens supported increased building heights. But I said to that council member, I would not work through that through my office, but I would be willing to give you the third. So I would give you the third if you asked for it at a future discussion item. That was not done. So that's the only item that I have ever not worked through when they come to me directly. Otherwise, we're willing to work through it and find out what that is. No council member has had an issue. Councilmember Diaz, how was the experience for you? You went through the item using the future agenda item of the thing on your very first meeting. How was that experience for you?
No, we got the third, so it got on the agenda. But I guess.
But after that, how did it work? So
we
didn't just get to hear. So yeah.
No.
The whole process, did it work well for you?
Totally understand. Okay. Totally understand. You and I spoke. I spoke with Mr. City Manager Jessica Knudsen. I got some information from Kelly Williams. We had agenda meeting and we discussed it, how we wanted to present it. So everyone was very, very upfront and helpful and assisted me on what we're doing right now.
You had access to all the information you wanted.
I asked for the copy of the ordinance, what it was before we changed it, and everyone was fine about that.
And you got to choose where it was at on the meeting agenda today?
Everything.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, now that you've experienced it, is this broken?
Here's my concern, because the way it's worded right now, and I'm trying to remember, it was after we switched to this new way to do it. I don't know, it was Vice Mayor Lynn, or it was Councilmember Campbell. And I was sitting out there, and one of them made a motion on something. The other one made the second, and everyone else didn't say anything, and so they couldn't get it on. And I don't remember exactly what it was. But so the way it's worded now, and I appreciate your upfront and what you feel, but it's worded where it could block somebody. It's just the way it's worded, and maybe I know we can say all we want. We're not going to do it. We don't do it. But the way it's worded right now, it can happen.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
but it hasn't happened is my point. And the other thing is, so if a council member chooses to go through that avenue, doesn't get a third. So anything that happens on city council, so we're not a coffee clutch. We don't just have coffee. So we're doing the people's business. And when that occurs, you have to have 4 votes or more. So if you can't convince a colleague or 2 of yours to join in that conversation, what is it that we're trying to solve? So the majority of the work that I do, certainly we do all the work here from the dais, which is code changes and or things required by the code. So there's things in the code that we require of citizens should they want to do something, a zoning issue, a potential liquor license, if they want to do business with us in a certain way. Those are dictated by code. But otherwise, we need to have a consensus of 4 or more council members to change any policy. Mm-hmm. So if we are just having 2 members of council say, I want to have this discussion, it may not happen. And I'm able to assist citizens all day long with challenges that they may be having that are not necessarily need to be solved by code issues. A lot of it just has to bring people together or partnerships.
I've also, sorry.
Yeah, Councilman.
I've also been witness in this room where there's a item on the discussion on the item agenda. And I know for a fact that city council members up here changed their mind. Oh, you know what? After I've heard all the input from the people, I'm going to vote. And they've actually said, I'm going to vote different now. Mm-hmm. You know, so if we don't allow that process to even take place, because we don't have that discussion, then one more thing I wanted to add. I forgot my presentation. I had a note and I skipped over it. And you and I have had this conversation. We're not hiding anything here. We've talked about, we always want to do things that paint this council in a good light. We have to earn that respect and that good light. And the way that this thing got changed in the first place shed negative light on the people, because there was a previous meeting, and I think it was a 7-0 vote that we weren't going to change it. And then the next meeting, when it came up it was this part of the meeting, it was this discussion item. And then when it came up to the last minute, a council member said, I slept on it last night and I changed my mind. And then it changed. And I mean, people there was an audible gasp out in the audience. And it was just weird how it changed, So I think that shed the council on a bad light when we don't want to do that. We want to do everything that sheds us in a good light. So.
No, thank you. And that's a great point. Decisions and minds are changed at all times throughout our discussions and deliberations with members of the public and the community as we're having these discussions. So, that is a great point. But from the time of an introduction of an ordinance to the final adoption, anything can change within that. And that's what occurred at the example you just gave was the introduction was 7-0, and then it changed. A motion was made at the final adoption and it passed at that point. But Vice Mayor Lynn?
Mr. Mayor,
please.
I have a lot of issues with how this whole thing came back the way that it did. But the thing that I really want to address is when you said that trying to get a third, if you can't get 4 people, that even want to discuss it, I think by having only the 2 people, how can I address this? Without violating open meeting laws, if I'm going to try to talk to Councilmember Campbell and say, hey, I want to put this on the agenda, and she says, yes, I support you, and then I want to talk to Councilmember Moses, and he's like, no, I'm not going to support you on that. It doesn't give me the opportunity to give all the information to a third council member to tell them, hey, I've heard from my constituents, this is what I'm hearing, and Councilmember Moses said, I don't agree, but Councilmember Campbell and I do. I can't even talk to the other council members about it if we don't put it on an agenda. I may be able to get a third and fourth. I may be able to, but not allowing it to even get on the agenda because nobody got all the information is where I struggle with. We haven't had a problem with this. I mean, I've been sitting on council with you for over 10 years. We haven't had a problem, but that doesn't mean in the future that we won't. And I don't know why we're even here when we did have that 7-0 vote. That's the only thing that just really concerns me because I don't want to have to touch those waters of open meeting laws. So.
Councilmember Campbell? Yes.
I find it interesting that we keep saying that this has never happened because I clearly did do it and it did get dropped. And I remember hearing the buck stops here. So I'm not going to go back and pull up every ounce of that discussion in front of people because it's not the right light. You've all heard me say this over and over. It happened to me and it made me very concerned that I was told that the buck stops here. It's not moving forward. So let's end that because that's already been discussed over and over. The part I agree that with Councilmember Diaz, the gasp in the audience, because there was several people in the audience. The place was packed and they all had letters. And some of them even said, I wasn't going to read this because it's all of you guys up there are admitting you're not changing this ordinance. We're going to keep it the same. Everybody in the audience, everybody on TV, we are not changing the way we're putting the item on the agenda. And the sad part is we gave direction to the staff at that time and it was voted on. And according to everything that I have found, there was never a discussion piece first. It went straight because it was an amended code. It went straight to this discussion or possible action. That's what it said. It was discussion or possible action. And the discussion was 7-0 only to change the time of the meeting. Nothing more. Many people in the audience sat down, folded up the letters that they wanted to tell the council how important this was. But because they were told, we're not changing it, we're only changing this portion of the code. Well, those portions of the code seem to be a little different, the time frame and how we put an item on the agenda. But it seems like the next time, the second read, I understand you can sleep on it. I understand constituents can run through the door and say, hey, Nancy, I hate that for this reason or that reason. And I might change my mind. I get it. I understand that's exactly what happened. But at that point, I think the audience was completely silenced. And tonight we were sitting just on a discussion piece, not an action piece. And I really believe it was an action piece. I mean, we voted on 7-0 to give direction to the staff to do something. And then it got changed. And then we didn't get a third, even though it changed. We just got that was it. Code was over. And as we sit here tonight, we don't even have, it's obviously the mayor can do, we're just giving direction. We're not even voting. So there's not even a tiebreaker. But I will have to say, with Councilmember Moses not being here tonight, he was one that voted no, because he thought, and he said through his campaign over and over, that he thought it went too far. Now he's not here at this discussion. I know Councilmember Diaz and myself were asked over and over, what do you think about the second and third? And do you think that's too much overreach? I said, yeah, I totally believe it, because it also was said that same night when they changed their minds, it said, we just a few months ago tried to make this ordinance a whole lot easier for you. In the same breath, another council person said, we changed this because we had 2 council members that were putting items on the agenda that we didn't want them to do it. So you guys are really smart out there and logical. How can the same words come out of a council person's mouth? One, we really tried to make it easier for you. And then the other mouth is, we did 3 because 2 were annoying us. Let's be honest. So here we are shedding bad light again, when a majority of the people that I spoke to for the last, everybody I ran into is like, you need to change that ordinance back, Nancy. It's wrong. I said, I can't do anything. I must get a third to have the discussion. Now we have a possibility of getting a third and a fourth, because one that actually didn't want us to do this is not here tonight. But we're going to give direction tonight, and hopefully you guys can convince some of the powers to be to make that happen. But I've said my piece. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Diaz?
So we're not voting tonight, just clarify, we're not voting on changing it tonight and then coming back and reading the final draft.
Yeah. So what we're doing tonight is we're going to get consensus from the council on if there is consensus to make any changes and what those changes might look like. Okay. That's what we're doing tonight. I'm looking forward to citizens. Are there any other comments from members of the council before we open the public hearing? All right. This is a public hearing. Who would like to address this? Yeah, you just make your way to the podium, state your name for the record.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Jeannie Taylor. I would urge you to undo redo. I know Lake Havasu is precious and unique, but by being the only city out of 91 cities that has a third, I think it's silly. I think it's time for us to go back to basic Robert's rules. You run your meeting, you have a motion, then there's a person who seconds it, and then you vote on it. You have that here. It should be a first, a second, that's it. The thirdsies are gone. It's over with. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel my heart boiling over this. Evelyn Tinsley. I do appreciate you clarifying that, Mayor. I do think Mr. Diaz has a great point, and it helps with transparency, especially for the future. So hopefully we can get this through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Vice Mayor. Bonnie Toy, I was here during that meeting, all three of those meetings. I don't know anything about Robert's Rule of Orders. I don't care how many city council meetings I've been to. I still know nothing about Robert's Rules of Orders. And it's all refreshing every now and then to learn something that I don't learn on a regular daily basis because I don't attend council meetings every single day. Learning the whole process, that was the first time I didn't know that you had to have 3 meetings in order to get a new code or thing changed, which after that incident kept me aware of each time a meeting came up that I had to pay attention to what things were going on, like with the Cannon Beach dude. By the way, Mr. Cannon Beach, I still approve of the beach. What I remember from my feelings during that meeting when it was presented and the way it was presented is that you basically took away any council member's desire or wish to even try to fight, because to get a third member, I didn't comprehend the whole open meeting law because, dude, talk to whoever you need to talk to. I don't understand what the open meeting law problem is. People should be able to talk. That's what communication is all about. In order for a third person to be in agreement, sometimes not all 3 people are in agreement. Oh, and before I forget, I would just like to say, sorry, guys, I saw Councilmember Moses the other day, and I just want to say, hey, Mr. Councilmember Moses, happy anniversary. Apparently, it has their anniversary, and they're not here. He's not here. He's with his wife, apparently. So, just want you to know that. And yeah. So, there's no reason why, if, like Mr. Diaz said, 91 cities all across, you keep changing laws so that we match the state left and right, but apparently Lake Havasu doesn't always match the state left and right, but I really would like to see it match the state with this one, because it's not fair for any council member to have to fight to get a third when not always people are in agreement. And if they can get one other person to agree with them, I think us as citizens really like to hear the discussions and things that go on. We want to be informed and aren't always informed when everything's behind closed doors. And then when they're behind closed doors, they don't always get opened up. I think having the 2, like Mr. Councilmember Diaz has requested, is fair. And I hope you go back to that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Greg Logan here. This whole discussion about going back to two seems like it's common sense to me. Why not have just a item of discussion and one vote to get it on the meeting? It just seems like you're denying the public the right to get their views before the council. And it seems like a no-brainer to me. Just go back to having one item, one motion and a second. No thirds, no nothing. At least the public will have the idea that you're willing to discuss this, and we get an input on any discussion you make. When you have 3, you have to have 2 seconds, a second and a third. You're denying the public, right? You guys can fight it out among yourselves, but I say this is just a no-brainer. Go back to the way it was. It's that simple.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Neil Tinsley, as most of you know. I agree with David. I think it should go back. There's a lot of passion on our council. And if, if someone wants something on that agenda and they're passionate about it, it's a fail safe to where they can get that on there. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. But I think that it's a fail safe and it's kind of a no brainer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly Lutz again. Who, what, when, where, and why. What's important in this is who and why. My question is, why did it get changed? What was the need? And I often ask that. Why are we changing things? Why was there a need to change it from a first and a second to a second? What was the purpose of that? And there was a purpose because someone brought it up and brought it to the council to do it. So there was a purpose. And to hear that it isn't an issue because it never happens, it does happen. Because it was crickets when we needed a third, when Nancy Campbell brought an agenda item up and Michelle Lynn, council member, Vice Mayor Lynn, seconded it, and then there was crickets for the third. It does happen, which brings us back to why did it happen? And who brought that agenda item forth? Out of nowhere. So there wasn't a problem. There wasn't an issue. And all of a sudden, it's an issue that you had to vote on and get rid of that first and second for discussion. And Vice Mayor Lynn brings up a good point. This is for discussion. It's an agenda item to be discussed in front of people so that they can bring up an issue or a point that you all need to look at that is concerning to the citizens. So that brings me back to the other one. Why did you limit the ability to bring an agenda item up for discussion? And then, am I ever going to find out who brought that up to who? Was that you, Mr. Mayor, that brought that up on your own idea? Say, you know what? We should have a third. Who brought that up in front of the city council and to say that we need to do a third instead of just a first and a second? Who was that did that? And why did it happen? And the optics, since I have a couple more minutes, is like someone else said about transparency. The optics are obvious that they want to silence two city council members who were bringing up items that the other city council members didn't want. If they don't want the agenda item, they have a vote. They can vote no on it. But they don't have the right to silence a discussion about it. So this needs to go back to a first and a second, and whatever frivolous discussion that two council members bring up, y'all are going to have to sit through it and listen to it and then vote no on it if you don't like it. You might learn something that those city council members bring up that's important for the city. So I urge you to go back, clean this up, and have a transparent council without trying to silence certain members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. I don't know what more I can say. If I listen to the rest of my citizens out here, it's pretty obvious. It wasn't broken, so I don't know why y'all tried to fix it. 1 second is normal. I mean, that's it. I've been doing this for years of having meetings. There's a motion and a second. I never heard of 2 seconds. I looked up in Robert's rules, and I grant you may use a modified Robert's rules system here, but that's pretty straightforward when it comes to making a motion. It almost looks, as some people have said, that this is an attempt to try and limit us as the citizens from understanding what's going on in this community. And that's not right. We have enough problems in Washington. We have enough problems in the state of Arizona. We don't need them here in Lake Havasu City. People want to hear what's going on. They want to be involved. And to take any of their rights away that are guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, that's a mistake. Mr. Mayor, you're here today, but we don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow. I mean, hopefully you are here tomorrow. I don't mean it that way, but hopefully you may find something else that you want to go and do. And that's a great thing. But I have to worry about the guy that sits there or the gal that sits there when you're not here. And that's my biggest concern, okay? You're a straightforward guy. You have a good reputation with the people. You talk to them. But I don't know if that's going to be the case in the future. We're dealing with it right now, and I don't even want to get into this thing with what's going on down there in Washington. But you can see what happens when people no longer have the say in how the government is run. And if you read it, it's by the people, for the people. That's the name of the game. Go back to the way it was before. It wasn't broken. Somebody thought they were going to fix it. I don't agree with that person. It's too bad somebody else isn't here tonight. Too bad Councilman Moses isn't here. Happy anniversary. But this is not right. Take it back to the way it was. Give the people of this community the things that they deserve based upon the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the City Council on this item?
Syl Jennings. And maybe you can correct me on what I heard, but what I heard from you was, well, if we just come to you and the city manager, we can work this out and we can get it up quicker. I don't want to have to do it behind the scenes, getting it back there. We have 6 council members plus you, but if I can go to one of my council members and talk to them about my concern, I shouldn't have to worry that I need to go to 2 more and talk them into doing it. And I don't want them in the back room, Ms. Lynn, like you said, working something out behind the scenes to be able to get enough people. So this thing with having to have a third is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to schmooze you and the city manager to get it done. And going to one of my city council members should be enough. Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the council on this item? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Before I turn it back over to council members for some discussion, there was a lot that needs to be unfolded that might not be truthful information. So let me just give some clarification on some things. Open meeting law requires us as elected officials to have a meeting in public. So that's what open meeting law there. It's there to protect the citizens so that we're having discussions in public. There are no closed door. There are no back door. There's no schmoozing me to get something on the agenda. There's a lot of history of where did this come from. This all actually came from because it took away a third avenue for council members to get something on the agenda. So that it used to read, work with the mayor's office, work with the city manager's office, or do a future agenda item. So you had 3 options. One council member didn't like the option of the city manager and asked that to be removed. That's what started this whole thing. We've updated this code, I believe, 3 times in the last year and a half or 2 years because of all of those different areas. The second part that brought this back to discussion was during a council planning session. Council members were able to bring forward some initiatives that they wanted to have addressed, and one was the start time. The start time of the meeting is in the same section. So I know we refer to Robert's Rules of Order. We don't use Robert Rules of Order. We use the Rules of Order dictated in City Code. You don't have to be surprised on how a council meeting is going to be run because the City Code tells us exactly how we're going to run it. This is that code section that we're talking about. So the code section says what it's going to be. If we were to use Robert Rules of Order, as Councilmember Diaz mentioned in his opening remarks, it would take a first, a second, and a vote of the 7 members of this body with 4 or more voting yes. That would require 4 to get something on the agenda. So when I said that it's not an issue, there will be times that a council member has an item that they want to have in front of the council. That's going to happen. There's going to be times that the council is not interested in having that conversation, whether there's a first, a second, a third, a fourth, it doesn't matter. There's going to be times where that's going to occur. Some of the comments were brought, let's go back to the way that it was because it's too burdensome to have a conversation with a colleague on council. That's not a behind the scenes or a closed door meeting. That's hey, I have this agenda item. Citizens are bringing this forward. Does it require a code change? We've had things that council members have brought forward that don't require code changes. There's no jurisdiction that this body has to address that issue. However, we can facilitate it with other bodies that might have things to address with that particular issue. Those are the types of things we're having. We don't have any behind door meetings at all. All the meetings we have are in front of the public with public engagement as we just occurred right here. So all of the things were some of the comments were, how did this even come? And are you the one that wanted it? And, how did it just happen? Nothing just happens. It was all done in public. In fact, in the introduction, we had 7 citizens speak at the call to the public on the introduction of the current iteration of this ordinance that we're discussing today. And we had 3 at the final adoption speak. So it was done in public, an agendized meeting on television. It's recorded. You can go back to the archives and watch those and see exactly how that discussion took place and what the comments were on there. Nothing is to not be transparent or open or allow for free flow of conversation at all at any time. So I think it's important that we understand what all of that is. I don't do anything without 4 or more people sitting at this dais making those decisions. That's what changes the code, and then I follow the code. So that's how that is. Again, if a council member does not get a second or a third, in this case, as the current code works, they can still come to me, and we'll find an avenue. We're not trying to thwart anybody's ability to have a discussion or to be able to address the needs of our citizens. That's what we do every single day in service of our citizens. That's what we'll continue to do. Right. Councilmember Diaz, did you have some comments?
Yeah. So when in March, I guess it was March of 2023. So prior to that, I don't know what the dates were. Well, there was a 7-0 that we were going to leave it the same. You yourself got accolades from the citizens and in the newspaper. And everyone was like, good, we're going to leave it the same. And then at the meeting when we had staff, I didn't have staff, but at that time you had staff draw up at the last second, a council member said, I've slept on it and I think we should require a third. And then at that meeting, it was voted on 1, 2, 3, and it voted past 4-3 to change it. And it changed. So, and the way it's, and I can't reiterate this strong enough, the way it's written right now, even though we can say we don't block people from getting items on the agenda, it can be construed that way. So why don't we just put it back to the way it was before? And like I said before, if Councilmember Koch or Vice Mayor Lynn, Councilmember Moses, Councilmember Dolan, Councilmember Campbell have an item that a citizen or anyone or even themselves feel needs to be put on the agenda, I trust them that they've done their research, they've done their due diligence, and it's something that is in their purview should be an agenda item. And let's get it out in front of the public and talk about it. But the way it's written right now, just take that negative away, because it can happen, even though we say it doesn't. It can happen when you can block somebody. So
sure. So the dates are February 28th was the first meeting. Again, feel free to go to our archives. Mm-hmm. And then the second meeting on adoption was March 14th. What was presented at the March 14th meeting from the staff was what the council gave direction, which was to keep it the way that I believe Councilmember Diaz is asking, for a first and a second. That was what was included in the council communication on the floor, which is any council member has the ability to do that. A suggestion was made and then a motion with a second and when a motion and a second, again, to the rules of the order of our meeting, it requires we have to have the vote. The vote won, and so there's no opportunity for a second motion at that point. I just want to make sure that we know how it occurred. So it occurred in an open public meeting, and that's how it can be. You might not like how it happened. You might not like the outcome of how it happened, and that's why we're here today to have the discussion. But it's important that we understand. And
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, believe me. But the way that went down, it just throws the council in a bad light. Sure. Because it's like, maybe there was some phone calls made. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Because it happened just so quickly and at the last minute. I mean, I was sitting right in that second chair there, and I looked up. I couldn't believe it. I went down. It's just.
Yeah. So, all right.
Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. What we'll do now is we'll move through and get consensus of the council. And we can start with you, Councilmember Campbell.
Statement.
You can have your statement, and we'll grab your consensus now of what direction you'd like to see. So we'll start with you, Councilmember Campbell.
Well, on item 11, it says future discussion items. And so my statement is this: I've had, I don't know how many people come and call me and say, why are all the trees in this town dying? Why are all the trees dying? I could go to a city, somebody else, somebody smiles in the audience, and trust me, people are noticing. And I could go to the staff and say, hey, why are the trees dying? Okay. And the staff can tell me the reason. And then I'm supposed to pick up the phone to everybody that wanted to know about the trees dying? Or would it be better for me to say, hey, it says discussion. It doesn't say action item. It says discussion. So maybe we have an arborist, we have staff that are far more educated than me, that I would love all the people that have these questions to come flooding into the building, ask the questions to the staff so they can get validation that they're not worried about every tree in town dying and what are we going to do then? So am I not allowed to do that because it's not an action item, or am I allowed to have discussions to ask people to the staff to present their case to the citizens that are concerned? Or is it because it's not a code change that I shouldn't be doing that? So if that's where this all happened, I guess you guys need to clarify to me. But I personally think that I don't want to be the messenger on the phone to a bunch of people and tell them what the staff said. I want the staff and the people to have the communication. And that's what I want. Is this something I'm allowed to do if I get a first, a second, and a third? Or
absolutely. Yeah. So if you want, and we can do, or you can work with me and we can figure it out. I get those same questions and I tell them why the trees are dying. So I ask the team and I find out what's going on and then I respond.
If some are wondering, there's probably a whole lot more that are wondering.
Sure.
So get it out in the news. Let everybody know why the trees are dying and what we're going to do to fix them. Okay. So maybe that might be my final motion here. No, just kidding. All right. You guys already know my direction. I don't have to go any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Campbell. Councilmember Diaz?
Yeah, I would like to revert back to the March 15th, or March 14th. Was it 15th? 2023.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Vice Mayor Lynn?
Revert it back to the March 14th.
Councilmember Koch?
I didn't make any comments earlier. I was waiting to hear the public's comments. But as part of the council that made the vote and was here, I hope that some council members never get accused of things. There was, in me being behind the dais when that happened, there was no backroom meetings. There was no conspiracy theory. It was a vote. It was an idea. It's how we voted. And when we walked out, that's what we do. We stand behind a vote that we made behind this dais when it's a 4-3, whether we voted for it or against it. So, I have never once, under 2 mayors, 3 terms, had any problem getting an item on the agenda. I don't know anybody that you've ever told no. I don't remember the former mayor telling anyone no. So, people act like the only way to get an item on the agenda is if we get a first, a second, or a motion, a second, and a third. And it's totally not if we want something on the agenda, it'll get on the agenda. It does. I sit back here and I've done it for years. It gets on the agenda. So I don't have a problem with it. So however we vote, I support it, but I'm not in favor of changing it this time.
Yeah. Please. We've had your opportunity to speak. We have to have the discussion here. So thank you, Councilmember Koch. Councilmember Dolan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't see a problem with, I haven't had any problems getting anything on the agenda. My problem with changing it is we have had willy-nilly requests. We've had someone comes to a meeting, something comes up in a meeting, it's the end of the meeting, and it's, can we get direction from staff? Well, there's no due diligence, no research, anything. It's not even like, okay, let me look into that. No, it's removed by the few people in the audience or the one person that said it. And the incidents we've had, we had one lady who was responsible for death threats to council members and mayor requested that we investigate fixing fuel prices in the town. Well, it's because she was mad at me and I owned a gas station, and somebody said, hey, can we get staff to tell us how fuel prices are set? That's not a city thing. And if they really think that there's price fixing, you go to it's a federal government issue that does it. So like I said, no due diligence. We just feed off some of the vocal minority that's in the audience. And So that's my problem. We have had those willy-nilly moments. So, and I guess my point is if you can't get a third, how are you going to get a fourth to change anything? So the tree's dying. If you present that, and I think that's an issue, and I've had people say something, then yeah, let's have a discussion. But if it's somebody that wants to bring up, let's research why gas prices are the way they are, or let's research why concrete prices are the way they are. No, that's kind of a hidden agenda thing that I don't think deserves to be at the council level. And then, yeah, it should go to 3 people. Or if we want to change it, let's do Robert's Rules of Law and let's have a second and the council votes to decide. Because the problem is we are a council and we can only do something based on the will of the council. I like the fact how we're doing this now, that if somebody does bring up something and they do want an agenda item, they get to present it to the whole council. And we do have that discussion, and then we decide if we want to include city resources and get briefing from the staff, because, we shouldn't be wasting council or city resources just to get some information that we could have asked, And so that is my issue. I definitely listen to the community. And if I have people saying things, and if somebody brings up something on council that I think, yeah, that's definitely an issue, let's discuss it. But when in the past, when we've had issues, like I said, that have been willy-nilly with no due diligence, it's why bring it up before council just for a discussion that has nothing to do with our governing body. So, like I said, I voted for the change last time, and I support keeping it the way it is right now, because we haven't had a problem, and you can get something on the agenda. And if it's something that people want, the people show up. But my also problem too is sometimes the audience is council members tell people things out in the community and get them riled up, and then they come to the meetings, but it's just that council member that got them to go there and give that information. So I listen to the community. I talk to a lot of people, and if it's something that affects the whole community and we should spend resources on it, let's do it. And so we have all those avenues. So just to make it a little bit easier, so we can have a lot more discussion items come before council that have nothing to do with council, maybe, then like I said, if it ain't broke, I think it works now. And so, yeah, I'd say we just keep it.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Dolan. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Lynn.
I have just a concern with a comment that Councilmember Dolan said. When we put something on the agenda, or request to put something on the agenda, we cannot have a discussion of what that looks like. We can't. That's why we asked to put it on the agenda, so later on we can have a discussion. So that comment made that, for example, I want to talk about the trees. I cannot say, I want to talk about the trees because this, and then you can talk about it. We can't do that before we put it on the agenda. So I have a concern with that. I really think this is about sharing information. It is about sharing information. If I hear something and I cannot share the information I heard from my constituents with everybody on this council, which I cannot unless I put it as an agenda item, it's just giving the information. And how we all vote on it, if it comes down to everybody heard it and it is a 4-2 or whatever it is, that's okay. But not being able to get the information to my other council members is a problem for me from what I'm hearing from my constituents. It is a huge problem for me that they can't hear what I'm hearing. And I could do what Councilmember Campbell said. I can tell my constituent, oh, well, here's Councilmember Moses' number. Here's this number. But why are you doing all that work when there's other people in the community that probably want to hear about that too? So I think it really is about sharing information. It's not about blocking anybody. At least I hope it's not. It's not trying to put willy-nilly things on there. It's about communicating. Thank you.
Councilmember Diaz.
Yeah, and I wanted to let me clarify something. I wasn't accusing anybody of doing something shady or whatever, but just the optics. It was just the optics, how it went down. And once again, I do have faith in all my other council members here, my counterparts, that if they want to bring up an item for discussion for a future agenda item, it's not, and I keep on saying willy-nilly, but it's not going to be a willy-nilly. They're going to do their due diligence. And then we have the discussion with the involvement of the citizens, and we find out if it's viable and it's an agenda item, and then it moves forward through the process that you've so perfectly laid out how that process goes. You know, the other thing is, let's say that I go to you, Mr. Mayor, and I ask you for an item, and then based on our discussion, you say, no, it's we're not going to get that on the agenda. I don't think you're ever going to do that. But let's say it happens. Then I come to a meeting and you say, any other business for a future agenda, and I do what I did on November 26th meeting, and we get a second and a third, and then it gets on. So we have those. The ordinance says or. It doesn't say one or the other. So anyway.
Yeah, or both.
Or both, yeah.
You know, what I love the most is that we're having this conversation because this seems to be the most pressing issue that's a non-issue happening in Lake Havasu, where anyone's getting anything they want on the agenda, and we're talking about everything. So, yeah, excuse me. You had your opportunity. It's now my opportunity. So it's no council member has had any challenge getting anything on the agenda whatsoever. And so it's really just the optics of us trying to say that has been a challenge. And it just everyone has found an avenue or not, whether it's one vote or not. I mean, I've heard through some of the testimony or some of the comments from council members is, let's bring it out, let's talk about it, and then whatever the vote is, the vote is. Obviously, that's not the case because the council voted on this, and now all of a sudden we don't like what the vote is, so we want to try and change it again. This would be the third or fourth time in 2 years. So again, I don't mind how things get on the agenda at all, but we just need a call a thing. So if we don't know how to navigate through the process or what's on the city code, then we need to call that out instead of trying to point fingers at other council members. And I don't mind. I'll take the blame if you want to say it's the mayor that's not letting that happen. That's just not the case. How any of these things are occurring, and so we're willing to talk through whatever the challenges are. We'll address whatever the challenges are. And I think we have shown that that's what we're going to do and continue to do. So what I would do is I will offer this, since we don't have Councilmember Moses here, our code would say that if you had 3-3, that it would fail. So I don't support changing it. However, what I would do is I would ask staff to bring forward a future item for introduction that changes it to a second. So it would be, I want something on a future agenda. I would like a first and I would like a second. And then we can have all 7 members of the council vote on that item when it comes forward at a future meeting. So that way everyone has their voice heard. We can have the discussion with all members of the council. And I don't think anyone is ever trying to silence anyone's voice. That hasn't occurred. And even if we thought that that's what was happening, it hasn't happened. So again, there are going to be things that members of the council want to speak about or want to discuss that are not going to be forward. So
can you repeat what you're going to give staff, the direction you're going to give staff?
What you want, what you've asked for.
And then we just vote on it as a whole council.
Correct. Yeah. Mr. Knudsen and Ms. Gary, do you have any questions or clarifying points on that?
Mr. Mayor, that's not what I heard. What I heard was you are willing to put it back on the agenda, and then when it comes in, you get a first and a second, and then it will go to a vote during that meeting on whether or not. That's not what.
No, it's
Councilmember Diaz.
You request the item and you get a second.
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't go back to everybody voting to get third, fourth, right?
I had a period there. Then the council as a whole will vote on that item and to decide if it makes sense to move forward. So what would come forward would be an item that says a council member at a future discussion item can ask for the item, get 1 second.
Yes.
Period.
So that's going back.
Council will then vote on that.
So that's going back.
Yes.
Exactly what we did on March 14th.
We will bring that forward as an introduction to vote on.
Okay.
Mayor, and I want to thank you for that.
Ms. Gary? Yeah.
Mayor, so that's my understanding. So staff would bring back an item to introduce a ordinance to amend the current city code to make it to a first and a second. And then council would have the opportunity to decide whether to introduce that ordinance or not. If it is, then it goes to adoption. So it's still like if we're going to introduce the ordinance and then it goes forward or it doesn't, if it does go forward, then we still have the adoption piece.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll still have 2 more meetings to hear this item. Yes. And Councilmember Campbell. Yes.
I just want to say, I want to thank you for that, because I have seen this room full of people that come up and there was not one person that was opposed to this idea. And I appreciate that you're giving them the opportunity to be heard, because that's what they wanted. And Councilmember Diaz was very aware of that. And I think that also helped him get the number of votes that he got in, because he did say the first thing he was going to do was to bring this up. So I appreciate you listening to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on this item? All right, we'll move on to item 8, which is the call to the public. This is when citizens have the opportunity to address the city council on items within the jurisdiction of Lake Havasu City. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. There will be a light indicator box on the screens around the room. At this point, it's not on the agenda, so we can't have a two-way conversation, but we can listen intently to your comments or respond to any criticism that may come our way. And again, we ask that you just address the city council on those items. You don't have to sign up to speak a call to the public, and we didn't have anyone sign up for call to the public. But if you would like to share anything, feel free to make your way to the podium and state your name for the record.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Vice Mayor. Happy New Year. And Councilmember Moses, again, happy anniversary. I know you're not here, but if you ever get to watch it, happy anniversary. I was walking up tonight from the Daytona Wash. Is it Daytona Wash? Pima Wash. Whichever wash. Down there off of Swanson, next to those ginormous apartment things. And I noticed, actually, a friend of mine had been in the parking lot one time, and I was at the apartment, I don't know if it's apartment complex or what it is. The address is 2060. I'm assuming Swanson. It's the new, and they have the pretty little like condo-y type looking buildings, and the parking lot is in the center. Well, they recently put out patio fencing along it, which I thought was really cute. Also, I noticed that when a friend of mine had taken me there because she was visiting somebody there, she kind of laughed at me because the first thing I noticed was I didn't see any handicap spots. And I thought to myself, of course, that's just like really rude. There should be some handicap spots. And then I noticed, like, with the new fencing up on the sidewalk where they put a little pretty patio, like anybody actually on a wheelchair that managed to get up on the sidewalk would struggle because, like, it's probably wheelchair width, if that, between the sidewalk, the end of the sidewalk, and the fencing. And these are some of the newer complexes that you get planning and zoning had approved, like I want to say in 2020 or 2021. And I just thought that was really weird, and would just like to suggest that maybe you guys need to work on handicap accessible issues around the city, because there's a lot of issues around the city when it comes to accessibility for anybody who struggles with a handicap. Period. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the city council on items within the jurisdiction of Lake Havasu City?
Good evening. My name is Waylon Gates. So I don't obviously know how it works very well. There was an item that was on the consent agenda that is in part what I'm addressing now. The item that was on the agenda is not that big of a deal, but I think the overall picture of it is important for you guys to understand more about what's going on with that. So the item was the agreement regarding reclaimed water going to a parcel that's on the island. That particular solution creates a couple of issues. It creates stagnant water that's just sitting on the island that causes bugs and mosquitoes and odors, which for the immediate neighbors is not ideal. It's also just a wasteful use of water. So we're taking water that could be used to water, I don't know, maybe dying trees, I don't know, but and we're just dumping it out there to evaporate. Of course, some of it's going to absorb into the ground, but water that would be used, water that water could be used for is now being used we're using potable water. So we're reducing the amount of potable water that we have by just dumping water that could otherwise be used for a more productive purpose. There's also an issue with this. It's bad community financial policy is what I'm calling it. So the agreement tonight was that that water is being given to that parcel for free. Granted, I don't think they have a use for it. It's more in the city's interest because they're just getting rid of the water, because the reclaimed water is a issue for the city and needs to be dealt with. However, they get the water for free when literally their neighbors pay for water, the same water. I don't know if all the users of that water are aware of that, but that's happening. The golf courses are the largest user of that water. So the big picture is that's part of a multi-pronged approach to deal with reclaimed water, what I call treated sewage, ultimately to dump it in the lake. But right now, as a stopgap measure, we're dumping it on this property, but really it's going to the lake. That was voted on in October. I don't think the public had a lot of knowledge of that or what's going on there. So I'd like to see there be more transparency for that. And I think you guys should dig into it more to understand more what it is. So ultimately, I would say that the city should be working with key players to find solutions that are less wasteful and overall improve the community, with a higher priority being given to using reclaimed water in any way that replaces the use of potable water. Potable water is our limited resource. I supported on that a no vote. Encourage the mayor and council to ask for more comprehensive solutions along with full transparency regarding the sewer system and specifically the way which we navigate the intersection of potable water and reclaimed water uses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to say thank you for being here. And the only thing that I haven't came to very many of these. I've just been voted in as District 3 Director of our Republican Party here in Lake Havasu. And there's all kinds of personalities we deal with. We don't always agree. But what I'm most disappointed tonight is some of the comments that Mr. Dolan made over the phone. He may think something's willy-nilly, but maybe someone out here who pays taxes and pays salaries wants to be heard. And you are voted on by us to represent what we feel is important. And Mr. Mayor, you've always been someone gracious, and I've always had a great relationship with you. Nancy, Mr. Diaz, Michelle, maybe a little bit, but I do know these two are out in the community, and we get to know them. I didn't go to their offices. They came to me. So I would encourage you to do that more. Mr. Mayor does it all the time. But it makes me sad because we have a beautiful city and we may not always agree. And this last year was crazy, the election year that we went through. But I can tell you honestly, it's better to listen to what people say, whether we agree or not, whether we're just silent, let them speak. We might be thinking, la, 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 la. But we can be polite. And listening to what their concerns are is your job, not shutting people down. And I just respectfully disagree that thinking something's willy-nilly and just disregarding it. These people come here, have worked all day, a lot of them. I'm not, I'm retired. But we need to give people a chance to speak. And the vote might go the way you intended it, or maybe not. But I know one thing, I do try to work across the aisle, and I like to always try to give people the best of me, hearing them and listening to them. And at the end of it, I may not agree, but we need to learn how to be polite and listen to your people out here because they voted you in. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the city council during call to the public? Get yourself to the microphone, please.
Yeah, I want to thank my mayor and my city council always for the good job they do here in this town. I'm familiar with how government works over 50 years, and I'll tell you, we've got a pretty good system here. We got Michelle and all of you, and I really appreciate it. And please support Fire Station 7. It is not an additional station. It is something is needed. We have a hole up on the top of the hill, and we need something up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the city council during call to the public? All right, we'll go ahead and close call to the public. All right, the next item on our agenda is the current events. Are there any council committee reports? All right, moving on to item 10, our future meetings. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, January 28th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. It's a regular meeting. And then on Thursday, January 30th, 2025 at 8:30 in the morning, we'll have a planning session. That generally lasts pretty much the entire day. Then moving on, item 11 is future discussion items. Are there any future discussion items?
Mayor,
Councilmember Campbell?
I have a future discussion island.
Okay.
Can we have a discussion on why our trees are dying?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And do we have a third?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not allowed to ask any more information, just why the trees are dying. I can't ask any more information right now.
Correct.
Can I ask what trees are dying?
No. Yeah, you can offer a third at this point, and we can have the discussion, or you could work through my office and we could have figured that out and put it on an agenda in the future. But this is where we find ourselves now. So a third or nothing.
Okay, I'll give a third. I'm just hoping they're not in Councilmember Campbell's yard that we're worried about.
Yeah. So we're not having that discussion. Are there any additional future discussion items? All right, motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thanks for being here. Be kind. We'll see you next time.